This week, we are looking again at the draft health regulations, which are still open for comment until next week, Friday, the 5th of August. And joining us now via StreamYard, we say good morning to Michael Swain, Executive Director for Freedom of Religion South Africa. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Jonathan. Great to be with you at Breakfast with Friends.
So good to be chatting to you as well. So, Michael, let's get straight into it. Most people no longer consider COVID-19 a threat of any sort, and life has definitely gone back to normal. No mask wearing when we go to the malls or to the church meetings. And but there is still this thing hanging over our head called the amendments to the draft, or draft amendments to the health regulations. Tell us about this, and why is it a religious freedom concern?
Well, thank you. Yeah, the answer is yes, of course. I mean, most people have breathed a big sigh of relief when the minister did repeal the regulations. And remember, those regulations were basically carry-over regulations, essentially from lockdown. So we had the interim regulations, and then we had these new regulations that the minister passed. Now, when he repealed them, of course, everybody, I think, breathed a collective sigh of relief, and life kind of pretty much went back to normal. But what probably people failed to realize or failed to notice is that when he repealed that particular set of regulations, he did not repeal the draft health regulations. And as you said, they're still open for comment. Now, the problem with these draft health regulations is that they're issued under the Health Act. In other words, they are effectively sub-regulations passed under an existing act. And they literally give the most unaccountable and sweeping levels of power to the Minister of Health through the passing of regulations. He basically signs it off. And what he's done is he's prepared in these draft regulations a set of amendments to existing regulations. And they effectively allow him to impose and place restrictions on every aspect of our lives. And what he has to do to achieve this is to declare a particular disease what the Act defines as a notifiable medical condition. Now, this Act, of course, was designed for serious health interventions. So, for example, let's suppose there is a new outbreak of something like COVID, for instance, and it obviously has serious impact and serious national health effects or what have you. Well, then I think we'd understand that, the minister must be able, as our Minister of Health, to take pretty swift and important measures. But the fact of the matter is that COVID is now very much less virulent, less, let's say, health aggressive. There are less hospitalizations, there are less deaths than there were, because it's mutated and it's now effectively an endemic disease that we have to now cope with. But he's listed it as a level 2 disease under the notifiable medical conditions. And that puts it in the same category as, for example, tuberculosis or hepatitis or leprosy. And what that means is effectively that although we've had the mask mandates removed and public gatherings limitations have been removed, travel restrictions have removed, literally we could go back to that at any time under these regulations.
And that, of course, without there needing to be a state of disaster declared. So it gives the health minister way more power, right?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, the national state of disaster, and we've experienced this now. I mean, we mustn't forget that we were effectively under house arrest for long periods of time. We had curfews for long periods of time. We had severe limitations on our religious gatherings, even unfairly discriminatory limitations on our religious gatherings for a very long time. But the national state of disaster had to be extended every month to month, you might recall. Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma would sign again for yet another month. And that went on for, over 2 years. Even a state of national emergency is subject to parliamentary review every 21 days. So this act, under the Health Act, there is no expiry date on the regulations. And there are also no review periods. But because these are passed as sub-regulations of an act that has already been passed into law, these regulations are deemed to be powers which have already been considered and delegated to the Minister of Health. So they don't have to be reviewed. There's no expiry date of these regulations issued in terms of the Health Act. They're literally in force indefinitely, and they're not subject to any form of oversight or review, not by Parliament, not by committee, nothing. So that is a real challenge.
With regard to that, as we wrap up, Michael, there are massive religious freedom concerns within those proposed amendments to the health bill. Just touch briefly on some of those, and then how can we, as the general public, make our voices heard?
Well, effectively, the religious freedom concerns are exactly the things that we've talked about in the past. I mean, the health regulations, for example, could impose mandatory quarantine, mandatory vaccination, mandatory treatment. We've written to the minister asking him to justify why COVID is still a level 2 notifiable medical condition. We've also concerned deeply that there is no amendment to another regulation, 20, which gives a 10-year jail sentence if you do not abide by those. So what you can do, and what we recommend you do, is to go to our website, forsa.org.za, click the link on the homepage. There's an image on the homepage, and make a submission. Make a individual submission. It will literally take you 2 minutes through the DRSA platform and make your voice heard. We've already had over 300,000 submissions made, which is going to be a big blockade, we believe, in these regulations going through. But we need to speak up now while we can, and we need to address this, because we cannot go back to unaccountable government simply ruling our lives through fiat, effectively, through simply signing off regulations. We need to have our democracy, and we need to have our freedoms.
It's so, so important. Michael Swain, as always, an honor and a privilege to chat to you. Thank you for your time this morning. And we wish you and the rest of the team at Freedom of Religion South Africa all the best. We will continue to support and continue to highlight those things that we need to highlight. Thanks to your amazing work.
Thank you, Jonathan. Much appreciated.